I really do believe that, like I say, within 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a tool that everybody uses to help them integrate all this data and make really good decisions. And it's just going to get better and better, leveraging machine learning, leveraging capabilities, pulling the data, especially as the data gets thinner and thinner.
It's Attribution Nation time, where we look at attribution from multiple angles in a unique mini-series format. Our first 5 episodes are all about attribution history. Let's go! All right, I am joined today on this episode of Attribution Nation by Eric Westerkamp, who is the CEO of CaliberMind. Now, CaliberMind was founded in 2016 by Oren Zamir and Raviv Turner. And Eric, you started there in 2018 running the sales and operations organization. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And then about two-ish, I think a little bit under 2 years later, you took over the CEO role. So let's talk a little bit more about, your journey and where attribution has come in the years that you've been in this industry and where you think it's going. So, CaliberMind is interesting because it's one of those companies that started as something else and then evolved into what it is today. Not quite as dramatic as Nintendo moving from playing cards to video games, but you started as a CDP company and then evolved into attribution. So when you joined CaliberMind, was it still CDP or was it attribution at that time? Or when did you kind of make that shift?
Yeah, it was primarily a CDP organization. The background of the company is that the original founders wanted to build a platform that they could use to pull all this data from these different systems, run machine learning on it, with the goal of being able to sort of extract marketing personas and then use those to kind of help create content and understand what types of things would work better for these different personas. Really interesting concept. The problem was that it didn't really work. And the reason it was challenging because they pulled all this marketing data in and they expected to just run all these machine learning algorithms on it and just come up with these great kind of insights. And they found out that the data was so bad that the machine learning couldn't really do anything meaningful with it. It wasn't deduped. It wasn't, leads weren't matched to accounts. There was fractured buyer journeys split up between, the different platforms, was the website or your marketing automation platform or your CRM. And so they made this transition where they really started to focus on building out a core platform that could consolidate the data, do something really cool with it, like stitch it, merge it, and create a clean set of data and information. And that's kind of the core of any CDP, right? The challenge I started to run into, and this is when I joined, was that it's unclear the role, I think, of a CDP within the B2B market space. Is it the CRM? Is it master data management? What is it really inside of these spaces, right? And that's when we started to really feel like, I would say, less of a shift and more of a pull by the customers, where they really wanted to say, hey, you've got this really super clean set of data. I want to mine that data for really interesting understanding of what's going on within the market, which kind of led naturally into attribution, engagement, and some of the other kind of core analytics that we do.
Okay, got it. That's interesting. So you pivoted from something that wasn't really working over to something that you could do and was actually what the customers were looking for at that time. Okay, love it.
Yeah, to be honest, from that CDP capability, it allowed us to do things that no one else in the industry at the time was really able to do, which is that we weren't just reliant on the data coming from those systems. We could fix it and do things with the data inside of our own platform to then do the analytics on top of.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the foundation of a CDP there, that's a really strong foundation for doing attribution because it's the exact type of data that you need to be able to do attribution.
Yeah, exactly.
So now you joined CaliberMind, and at the time, CaliberMind was not a marketing attribution company. It was something else. So when you joined, knowing that you weren't joining an attribution company, what was your view of attribution at the time that you joined CaliberMind and then as you were transitioning the organization from CDP to attribution? What was your view of attribution at the time?
I'll be honest, I didn't have much of a view of attribution. My background is primarily coming from software development and sales for tech companies, right? And the spaces we sold into it wasn't into MarTech, to be honest. So I didn't have much of a view of attribution per se. I did have a very strong view on sort of managing data for sales and marketing teams. At a couple of the organizations I've been with, previously I'd been at right before CaliberMind, I was at a private equity roll up. We rolled up 7 different companies into one company, and I was running the sales and marketing team there. During that time, we had huge amounts of problems with the data. Okay, we had 2 versions of Salesforce. We had Marketo and Eloqua sitting inside of the mix. We had all of these platforms, and I was trying to get my hands on good analytics because I'd always sales teams, my channel development teams from good analytics. What's the pipeline look like? How many leads are we getting? What's the conversion rates? What's driving all of that? And that kind of led me naturally there down toward questions that I was like, oh, these are attribution questions. What's actually causing, what's the best choices we can make from the marketing dollars that we're spending to drive more pipeline and revenue at the end of the day?
Okay. So you knew that attribution was a challenge that needed to be solved, but you didn't really have a perspective on it.
I didn't have much of a perspective on it other than I knew that that at all the organizations I had been with, that the data was highly fractured and that they were all struggling really to make really good decisions on the data, whether it was coming from the sales organization or the marketing organization.
Okay. Because we see a lot, and I'm sure you see this a lot too, is organizations that get on attribution, and it suddenly kind of almost like drives this competitive environment between sales and marketing, where marketing's saying like, "Hey, we helped influence this deal," and sales like, "No, you didn't do anything. We did everything." And so sometimes when you get sales people that have a sales background, they have a negative impression of attribution as marketing tried to take credit away from sales. So it's interesting that you just really didn't have a perspective at the time. Now, what was, again, at that time, what was your impression of marketing? Were you one of those sales people that was like, we don't need marketing, just give us a phone book and we'll be fine? Or were you one of the sales leaders that really truly saw marketing as a collaborator in the revenue process?
Yeah, I always wanted more marketing help. Everybody, to be honest, sales always want, because at the end of the day, that means more leads, more pipeline being generated, right? When I was running a sales organization at OpenText, marketing was really either brand awareness, events, like they ran big events. That was the primary driver of kind of inbound leads and things like that, or field marketing. And field marketing was really just supporting the sale. It was really supporting the sales team for dinners and lunches and things and basically small events, to be honest. There wasn't really a lead gen engine at either of the organizations that I'd been in. So we were always looking for marketing to help out more, but it wasn't really part and parcel of these companies. Now, these tend to be bigger, older software type companies that they tend to really be very sales driven, right? So everything is to some extent a sales driven outbound motion. That's been changing. Like with COVID, with SaaS companies coming up, that marketing has become, to be honest, much more important because the ability of sales teams to drive outbound has been going down steadily over the past, 5-10 years, right? And that's because individuals are doing much more research online. They're getting the data. They're getting a lot more of the information. They don't really want to engage with sales till later on in the cycle, right? So marketing has been becoming more and more important, which means that more and more budget and revenue has been shifting there. Even, a lot of our customers are bigger, older, more established software organizations. We're seeing more and more budget shift toward the marketing organization because the CFO and the CEO are realizing that's the top of the funnel. That is the beginning of the lead gen. And by the way, my sales teams are struggling more and more to generate their own pipeline. They need that support and that help. Do you see that kind of that banging against each other between marketing and sales? I think that depends on the organization, how they're set up. My view is that, to be honest, marketing and sales are merging and becoming closer together in the organizations that are more high performing. And we're seeing that. And they don't use attribution as a way of saying, this is my credit or this is your credit. It's what's working. Where do we invest dollars? And there's this big crossover point between the marketing and sales organization because there's a whole bunch of activities that sales is now doing that marketing used to do because of email and email security and all these things, right? And they need to know what's really effective across the buyer journey. our best performing organizations are using attribution and other things, engagement scoring and funnel analytics and these other tools to really analyze the whole buyer journey and determine at what stages or what things the right tactic, whether it's a marketing tactic or sales. And you may need marketing tactics downstream in addition on the funnel, in addition to upstream. And there you're really looking less about, like I say, credit and more like where do we invest dollars?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it used to be, to your point about, particularly in relation to COVID, it used to be, and this is how my career started. I started in B2B sales where it was, we had 1,000 sales reps, literally. And it was, you're calling in to a receptionist and, hey, can I speak to so and so of the
Right.
organization?
Person on the
And
phone, and yeah,
yeah, and you'd get routed over to the director of IT and you'd give your sales pitch and whatever. With COVID now, you can't even take that approach because you don't have an office line with a receptionist with extensions and just transferring somebody over because everybody's working from home. Not everybody, obviously, but like when you're working from home, you don't have, you're not on the company PBX anymore, right? You just have your cell phone. So like it's a lot more difficult for a sales rep to be as efficient with that motion as they used to be because you can't just call into that main number and ask to speak to so and so, the director of IT.
yeah. It's also really important, and we're seeing this more and more, where the sales team needs to know what marketing activities have happened when they do engage, right? And this is something that attribution and other tools, engagement scoring, stuff like that, really help with. Is that hey, here's an account, they're ready for you to call into. Okay, what have they downloaded? What have they looked at? Like what people have been involved, right? What does that buyer journey really look like? And then they're much more effective when they do that reach out, or maybe they just go into the first demo, right? And so instead of walking into that first demo cold, okay, hey, what do you want to talk about? Okay, I've seen these people have done these things. Maybe anonymously, these pieces of content have been downloaded. They've been interested in this. They've actually been engaging with us on our website for 6 months, right? Now I can ask some meaningful questions from a sales team. I know maybe who to kind of bring in, and maybe even know who to bring in, what experts to bring in inside my organization. And that's
Yeah,
again, that's
absolutely.
that crossover between when marketing and sales work really well together. That information is available for the sales team, and they don't then view this as a credit issue. Kind of back to your earlier question, that you start to see the sales teams views marketing as here's all the support they're giving me, and here's all the data and information they're giving me, so that I have a meaningful call with the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ability to see what somebody's been engaging with, whether it's events or content downloads or whatever, prior to picking up the phone and making that first phone call is
It's
invaluable.
huge. It's huge.
Back when I was selling, I would have loved to have that information, but I mean, we didn't have the
Yeah, the
technology then.
tools and the
So
information
yeah,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, this was what, 2000, 2001. None of this existed. So yeah. Now, when you joined CaliberMind and you were starting to sell the product, did you go in and like learn everything you possibly could about the product, or did you, or kind of like what was your approach to empowering yourself to be able to sell the product?
Yeah. I've always been a real believer that, you have to know the products inside and out. And so understanding how to demo, how it worked, how everything kind of works. Now, I've got a very technical background, which is a little atypical for sort of sales leaders. I degree in computer science, built a software company, sold, so I love to get into the products and see how they work and how things, this goes to here and how things work. But I think it's really important for sales teams because you want to be able to tell a story to the customer. And the best way to tell the story is to tell the story sort of in the product. Hey, your business problem, core problem or challenge is X, right? Let me show you how you can solve that problem and get to that answer here and being able to drill down. The challenge sales teams often get is that the business question coming in may be different. So they need to know the product pretty well to be able to navigate that. Especially, attribution is not easy. It's a complex process. It's a lot of different questions can be answered by it, right? Depending on whether you're the VP of demand gen or you're a campaign manager or you're the CMO, there are different questions. So you want to be able to very quickly be able to show how you answer those questions and prove that value in the product, which means you have to really understand the product inside and out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, having that technical product background, I mean, surely helped you a lot in that process. That not every salesperson has that technical product background, so I'm sure that helped you quite a bit. So, as you were learning the product early on, was there anything that like your customers told you about the product that helped you learn more about the product that maybe you wouldn't have known if the customers didn't tell you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I first joined, it's the first time I was selling directly into marketers themselves directly, right? And so some of the things it was just to some extent, it was understanding the product, but it was also understanding what are the drivers within the market. So I was always listening for and hearing like, what's the core challenge? What's the problem you have? What are you trying to really solve? And the big kind of aha moment for me there was we're really selling to not just one or two roles, but to a bunch of different roles within an organization that span a very distinct spectrum of data analytics and skill. To be honest, there's a pretty big skill gap in marketing for using data to make really good decisions, right? And I see that in the market. A lot of people are pushing back on, we don't need data, we don't need this. Is it because they don't need it or they don't know how to use it? Right? I mean, there's a lot of evidence. Bain and Company came out with a report that showed that marketing organizations that use good data, attribution, these other tools, like they outperform their peers by 25 to 30%. So the evidence is there that using the data is important. The question is, why do you get pushback on it? And that was an aha moment for me. And I think it came down to like, there's a real skill gap. You have people that go into marketing not because they are coming out of math degrees, it's because they're coming out of degrees they like to do creative things and they're very creative people. But now they need to use data to make good decisions about the creativity. Bridging that is really where I think the company that wins this space is the one that can bridge that well.
Yeah, I agree. Data is a huge competitive advantage if it when it's wielded correctly. And then that skills gap that you're talking about, absolutely. I know so many folks in marketing that came from graphic design or copywriting, and they got into copywriting because they were an English lit major in college, and they haven't had to do anything with data or math since sophomore, junior year of high school. And now they're, VP, CMO in their late 30s, early 40s, or maybe a little bit younger, who knows? But now they've reached a leadership role. They have to move from that creative brain to that math and data brain, and it's hard. It's really hard to start doing something you haven't done since high school, maybe, and make that transition.
It's difficult. It is. I think it's one of the reasons we've seen sort of this marketing analytics role kind of really start to kind of come up within marketing organizations. What we've seen is that the teams begin to depend on that person or maybe a couple of people to do all the analytics for them and feed them answers, right? What we're seeing though is that doesn't scale. Like how many of those people, like the number of questions coming at it, the amount of data keeps getting bigger, and they're not hiring 10, 15, 20 of those people, right? You still got two or three. And so we're really seeing this challenge in organizations where they've got just a couple of people that understand how to do this, but they need to expand the people who can actually have access to that data and information.
Now, I want to kind of pivot back to when you were making the change from CDP to attribution. Were you still in the sales role at the time, or were you CEO at the time?
Kind of a combination.
Combination. Okay.
After about 8 to 9, maybe I think it was 9 months in, the board had kind of made the decision to make the transition, but we didn't actually officially make it for about another 8 to 9 months after that when it finally came down. So I was kind of in a hybrid role of running this, helping with that, but also setting corporate and product direction.
Okay, got it. Now, when you were primarily in your sales role, did you have much influence on product and company direction at the time, or was that more when you started kind of transitioning into the hybrid role?
I did, but it was a team effort, right? Like it wasn't just me. It's like we have
yeah,
we have a really good team, and we were always sitting there going like, okay, what's working, what's not working, where are we getting pulled, right? I'll shout out to Nick Zongray, my head of customer success now, he was very in tune with customers, and he comes from background of Pedowitz Group, and and setting up maps, and like Eloqua and Marketo and stuff. And he was really kind of saying, hey, this is where I'm seeing need out here from our existing customers. This is what they're asking for. So the whole organization was really trying to listen to those signals, especially at that really early stage, and be like, this is what people are asking us to do, and this is where we're going to go. When I would say where I came in and added something on top of that was like, okay, because I'd run product at a much more scaled organization, I was like, now let's do some diligence around the space. And in addition to these 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, 10 companies asking, is it a space? Are there big competitors in there? Is this a place we can win? Right. And we looked at attribution. We said, you know what, that's a space that there's some competition out there, but I wouldn't call it hugely scaled yet. Right. And it was a space where I felt we could really go in, and we had technology and products and stuff that were doing it in a very different way than a lot of the competition out there. We felt we could really kind of go in there and start to win the space.
Okay. Cool. Now, I think it was right around 2019-ish, right before COVID, is when you moved into the CEO role, correct? How did that transition kind of come to pass?
That was hard. I came in, I think we finished off a post-seed round or something of financing there, right? We were kind of getting ready to kind of scale things up, and then suddenly COVID hits, right? And if you remember, COVID hit marketing really hard in that kind of late 19, early 20. It started to pick back up maybe 6 months later. So it was a period like, hey, are we on the right track? Are we doing the right things here? It was tough. I'd say what happened is we had an office in Boulder. Everybody went into the office every day. We had that kind of culture. We changed that. We moved out. We decided to go remote. We got rid of the office. That actually long-term started to help us out, because we really started to look outside of, Denver, Boulder, Colorado. How are we going to build a team? Where are we going to go? We started building up part of our sales organization in New York. We started hiring software development all around. We brought in outsourcing. So I'd say, as the transition was hard, the market started to come back, but it did actually open us up to kind of, to be honest, probably scaling better longer term.
Okay. Got it. Now, of the folks that I've interviewed so far, you are the only non-founder of the folks I've interviewed so far. So being a non-founder CEO, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being a non-founder CEO in your opinion?
Sure. I will caveat that I did found another company and built it and sold it. So I've got the founder experience. So I think that helped.
Yeah.
I would say that being a non-founder, when you're raising money and financing, people kind of look at that like you're not the founder. What's going on, right? And there's a little bit of that in the financing realm. Now that we've kind of gone past our A round and stuff like that, I think that's less and less impactful, because you see a lot more at this stage transitions where the founder may step back and you bring in more of a CEO role or something like that, right? Early on, that was a bit of probably a con to that. But I'll say the advantage is, having worked at much bigger organizations in a variety of roles, a lot of founders come out and they have an idea and they're great, but they haven't necessarily scaled anything, right? And so I think the benefit is, having run bigger organizations, having owned revenue, in the tens of millions and stuff, and bigger sales teams and stuff, I kind of know where we need to go. And something I use internally is I say that at about every time we double revenue, we're going to break the company. Right. And I call it these pivot points. And you're going to have to rebuild processes and rebuild teams and relook at everything. Right. That's been pretty accurate. And for what I've seen going forward, that's accurate. Right. And so I think having that vision and knowing kind of where we need to go, because having been there, helps us as we start to scale the company. Right. Less things that you need to learn, and more things that you're kind of lean on, that you have learned in the past, that you can kind of bring into the company. Let's be honest, where I think companies that have done multiple companies tend to do really well in their second and third company, because they've learned a lot of lessons in the first couple.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm a first-time founder, and I cannot tell you the number of lessons I've learned and the number of landmines that I've stepped on, that other people that have done this before would just be like, no, don't step there. Don't do that. Yeah. I do love that concept that you mentioned, though, of every time you double revenue, you kind of break the company. Like, I'm literally putting that in my bank right now for Attributa, that I'm like, okay, I got to remember this. That's a good one. I like that for sure.
I'll say the only thing, and the big thing that changes is that when you're early and young, it's kind of Wild West. Everybody's running around doing everything, and everybody does a lot of roles, right? The bigger you get, the more those roles start to kind of narrow and you need people to focus, right? And that can be hard to make those transitions. Like I say, every time you kind of like your revenue goes up by a click, the number of customers goes up by X, whatever. Every organization has to kind of start thinking about what does it mean. They're running on processes that got them to that point, but they now need to run on processes that are going to allow you to double again, right? And to be able to double again, that may not be the same activities that got you here, right? Especially, I'll say, in places like customer success and places like that, and especially in attribution, it's really hard. And to get it right, you've got to have an organization that's ready to understand how to make that kind of next step, right?
Yeah, yeah. So let's switch over to attribution now. How would you frame the marketing attribution category today? And do you really still kind of agree with just, I mean, the terminology of attribution, and like, what is attribution to you now?
I think it's a loaded question. So first of all, I want to say, like, I think attribution is an amazing technique that you can apply to data to help you make certain decisions, right? It is a capability that allows you to take essentially some indicator of value, typically revenue, pipeline, something like that, and then compare it back to activities that you're running out here to figure out which of these activities are most closely, aligned to the revenue, so I can make much better decisions, right? I don't know of a technique yet that I've seen that does it, that attribution does a better job of kind of tying revenue to these activities, right? There are some other things you can do. So I think it's hugely important for organizations. But I think it's one technique that companies need to be looking at to really make good marketing decisions, right? So I think companies people that are focused on, like, I just need attribution, that's going to help you get to level, to one level. But if you want to really understand it, you need to be able to take attribution, take the data that's driving attribution, and use it in more ways. We lean in on engagement and engagement scoring, because what that tells us is there's all this top of funnel activity, anonymous activity, website hits, things like that, that eventually ends up generating attribution potentially. But you want to understand how that stuff transitions to here, right? And it tends to be more real time data and information, right? The problem with attribution is that it's a bit backward. It's like looking in your rearview mirror. That's what worked, right? But it doesn't really tell you what's happening now. It depends on your sales cycle. B2C businesses, they can really look at attribution because it's almost real time, because it's e-commerce based and it's like it's happening right now. You go into enterprise organizations with 6 to 12 month sales cycles, it's a different story. So my opinion is that attribution is hugely powerful. I don't know how you would do a whole bunch of things without it. Like, we just released this whole thing on ROI, so I can take my costs by channel and apply it to, understand exactly the efficiency. Without attribution, I don't know how you do it, right? I don't know where you get the data and information. But you also need to, I think, pair that with other data and other information that allows you to see the whole buyer journey and make different decisions. Like, we internally use attribution and engagement at the campaign level to see which campaigns are generating engagement and then which ones get to revenue. And that tells us very different stories.
Got it. Okay. Now, you and I both know that particularly over the last couple of years, marketing attributions come under fire for being too much work, too expensive, too inaccurate, too difficult to actually garner insights from. How do you respond to that? What is your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I'll lean back into, if you're not doing that, then you're probably just guessing and on what's working, right? What are you using? Gut feel? All right, that's a way to do it. But when your CFO says what's working and show me the data, your gut feel isn't going to allow you to have a really meaningful conversation with them, right? Is attribution hard to set up? It can be. It really comes down to data and data quality. And data quality and good systems and processes, that's way broader than just attribution, right? If you don't have those, then you've got other issues. Your funnel isn't accurate, right? You don't know what's going on. Your ability to understand, like, what is actually driving any behavior if you don't have good data is suspect, right? If you fix some of that, now you're already getting to the point where attribution isn't really that hard to set up, So good data, good tooling instrumentation. I think you need, and again, I think there's been a history of it being really tough because you've had that data coming in and marketing teams that haven't been able to control the data. And so they're trying to take information that's sitting in the CRM that's controlled maybe by a different part of the organization. And they're trying to do attribution on top of it, but they have no ability to kind of really fix and manage and manipulate that data, right? I think newer tools are fixing those problems. I know we do. I know some of our competition does some of that. It allows you to fix that. It'll never be easy because there's a huge amount of data and it's messy. And as an organization, you got to make the decision that this is something that's meaningful to us. We want to put effort toward it. But if you do that, it can have real impact. I'm looking at some of our customers. I mean, I've got one of my customers has 300 people logging into our product every single day. Every campaign manager is using it to make every decision on their campaigns. And they say that their performance has almost doubled over the last 3 years because of the tool, right? So the evidence is there. I think, like I said, go back to this, Bain and company said like 30% increase for organizations that use data, including attribution, these types of tools, right? Data is the buyer journey is becoming more fractured. The buyer journey is becoming longer and spread out and a little bit more invisible. But the amount of data coming at you from different tools and products that allow you to put together things is just growing. So without something like attribution or a tool to centralize it, again, I just go back to like, what are you doing? Like, how are you going to make any good decisions? If you're not using the data, then you're just guessing.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've seen when I hear of organizations that say it's too much work or it's difficult to instrument or difficult to implement, I think part of that is, I think it comes from two things. Number one is a lack of investment in the data leading up to getting on an attribution platform. You're looking at an attribution platform to solve 5 years of data challenges in 5 weeks of implementation. Well, that's not necessarily that's not going to work, right? And then the other thing too is that I see that there's sometimes you get organizations that quite frankly just are not ready for attribution yet, not from a data perspective, but organizations that might be a little bit too immature in their own scaling, right? Like I look at like Attributa, we're an attribution consultancy, and we don't do attribution. Well, now people could say like, well, Drew, you're not eating your own dog food. And it's like, well, true, we're not, but we're not at the size and scale and complexity yet where we need it, where like I do all of our selling. I know where our deals are coming from, right? Yeah. We have like 3 marketing channels. Yeah. It's not that complex. Yeah. We don't need it yet. So I feel like sometimes organizations are trying to do it too early in their scalability or in their maturity process. And it's overwhelming and difficult because you don't need it yet. You're not ready yet. You don't have that level of complexity yet. So I think that there's sometimes there's a mismatch there and just who's trying to do attribution versus who needs it.
Yes, I agree. We see that all the time where we get a lot of customers or prospects that come into us and like, hey, we really want attribution. And then we dig in and we're like, you only have like 2 channels and you're you could do this. And the companies, some companies come to us and say, we know we're going to grow in complexity. We want to start getting it right. So we want to start with you. That's great. But then we get companies that are like, we really want to be able to make all these decisions. And I'm like, you could really make those decisions right now based on the data I'm seeing because the number of channels, the number of ops, the things are just simplified, right? Where I've seen attribution really successful, to be honest, is when organizations have multiple product lines, multiple business units, right? I need to be able to see what's working for my SMB segment versus my mid-market segment. And I need to be able to parse it between Europe and the US and APAC, right? Suddenly, there's literally there's no way without good instrumentation in a tool to be able to even get to answers there, right? And that's where companies, and by the way, I've got, 35 different marketing channels that are being run across the world. That's where things get really meaningful. Like we're onboarding God, how big are they? $28 billion company right now. They have 12 business units, right? And every business unit wants their own set of reports for their set of products, right? Broken up by region. Like, how do you do that without like you can do that in a spreadsheet? Like, you'll never get the data right. And then they want, at the end of the day, all that data to roll up so they can do, executive and board level reporting, and the numbers have to tie. This revenue versus it, all those numbers, and they have to roll up and add up to the same number that's sitting inside of, their CRM for all of their, otherwise no one will believe the data and they won't believe that that it's accurate.
Yeah. And without an attribution tool, it is hours upon hours of manually stitching disparate data sets together. So it just doesn't get done is the problem. So with where attribution is now, let's talk a little bit about the future. So where do you see attribution going in the future? Like, what are some of the most significant advancements that are going to be coming into the attribution industry over the next, 3-5 years?
Yeah, I think it's, one, I think attribution, I go back to my earlier response. I think attribution is a very powerful tool. I think it's going to get blended with a set of other capabilities that allow marketers to have a tool to help them make decisions, right? And we've actually coined a term called the marketing decision engine, right? For us, what an MDE really is it is a tool that sits at the heart of every marketing organization. It sucks up all that data information, cleans it, fixes it, dedupes it, gets it prepped, right? And then allows the teams to really get really good, actionable decisions out of it, depending on the types of questions they're asking. There's a whole set of questions that line up really well with attribution, right? There's a whole set of questions that line up really well with engagement and engagement scoring, right? There's other sets of questions that you want to understand that's about where in my whole buying process, things are having the most impact. Like the biggest question I'm getting now is customers saying, I've got a funnel, the funnel has 5 stages. What marketing activity is having the most impact to move people from this stage to this stage? They want to know, I've got friction points and I want to know how to move things. Attribution helps with that, but there's other tools that do. So I think you're going to see this migration from just attribution to this sort of centralized tool. And to be honest, our bet is every B2B company within the next 5 to 10 years is going to have a tool that does something like this at the center of their marketing organization. Because otherwise, I don't know how they make sense of all the data coming at them. Unless you're super small or your channels are very thin, you only got a few different things going on, there's going to be no way to do it. And that tool is going to start to become more and more central to these marketing organizations as it pulls in more and more data and makes sense of what's working.
Yeah. So you mentioned this new term of marketing decision engine. Is that something that CaliberMind is kind of embracing as your platform?
Yeah, we've actually rebranded. The whole thing is on the website. Our product we now consider a marketing decision engine with different capabilities that go along with it. Attribution being probably the biggest one that people are really coming to us for. Engagement scoring, funnel analytics, right? We're actually releasing a whole data science capability that sits on top of all that, because it comes back to these. This is actually, I don't think I mentioned this at our last cab, did I? We have a whole capability that drops on top of our system because, again, it comes to that skills spectrum that we see for our users. We've got these marketers and they want something really intuitive that they can use to get their answers. But up here, we've got customers that are saying, I want to run custom machine learning models to do things like anomaly detection on all my leads coming into your system. I want to recreate ICP scoring, my ideal customer profile scoring, using more features than just the firmographics that I see at the corporate level. I want to incorporate marketing touches and stuff like that into it. I want to be able to do regression analysis so I know exactly what engagement score means I'm 50% of the way to an opportunity so I can make good marketing decisions. We're plugging in a piece that allows people to do what's called BigQuery ML. It's basically write machine learning right inside of BigQuery SQL and have it apply right to our data set. And it allows us to cover that whole spectrum. But that's really where I see things like marketing decision engines going, is being able to cover the different personas from sort of those campaign managers, VPs of demand gen, CMOs, but also that data science group that wants to get access to that data and do very bespoke, custom things that are really tailored to their business.
And they can do it right inside your platform. They don't have to get the data out, put it in a data mart, and it's just going to be right. Okay,
yep, exactly.
That's really, really cool. I think that's really interesting that you've already started taking the business that direction to more of a decision engine versus attribution. That's really interesting.
Don't get me wrong, attribution is a core capability that's part of that because it drives so many decisions. But then you want to layer on top of that more data, more information, so you can blend the signals there with other signals, again, so people can make better and better decisions.
Yeah, which is really what it's about, is making decisions based on asking questions of the data, and the data spitting out an insight that allows you to say, hey, based on this insight, we should do X, Y, or Z.
We should do this. Yeah. It's at the end of the day, it's good decisions by marketing helps drive growth, right? And that's what you're going for. What the tools underneath are somewhat irrelevant, whether it's attribution or engagement or this. Like at the end of the day, that's what they're trying to get to, right? I want to make really good decisions that drive growth in my organization, right? And then I want to be able to show to my CEO and my CFO how I'm using their dollars and how the decisions I'm making here relate directly to the growth that we're driving.
Yeah. That's what everybody wants to get to, is just being able to make good, smart, easy decisions without having to do hundreds of hours of work to prep the data. Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned machine learning, and obviously you're injecting some machine learning into your platform. Are there any other emerging technologies or strategies that you think are going to be playing a pivotal role in attribution going forward, or marketing decision engines going forward?
Yeah, I think, I'll bucket this into two different things. I think there's a whole area of machine learning and AI that's going to start to play in there. And then I think there's a whole area of like automation instrumentation, right? Taking the decisions and automatically queuing up and teeing up things for marketing. I'll kind of leave that to the side for now. I've talked about how the challenge you have with machine learning and attribution or decision engines is that it very quickly goes down a path where the machine learning has to be highly tailored to the business that you're working with, right? And so that's why we've chosen to essentially put on a tool set that allows people to kind of do stuff and build out those capabilities there. We're using machine learning inside of our product for things like Markov chains. We're doing it for regression analysis. In our engagement scoring platform, we'll sit there and say like, okay, we're going to go look at every marketing activity that happened, and then we're going to create your scores automatically for you based upon which of these relate the most to pipeline creation or pipeline, either creation of pipeline or bookings, right? And using algorithms there. The other interesting thing that we've been playing around with is, where does, ChatGPT and large language models play in here? The challenge is that I've yet to see those things do a very good job of being able to like look at data and come up with insights out of data directly, because they tend to not do math very well. And the challenge is that they tend to skew. So I've had people say, hey, I just want to be able to ask your plot, have that go and do attribution for me. Okay, but what happens when it comes back with one number this week and a number that's 20% different next week? How do you figure out why? And the answer is you can't. But where it does play really well is that we're actually generating these buyer journeys in our system where we show every event and all the people and summarizing that data so that it comes back to how do I close that skills gap? I see those tools coming to really help close the skills gap towards people who have very good questions they want to ask, and being able to layer something like a large language model on top of the data you've already curated out of a system like a marketing decision engine to be able to easily answer those questions and then put it in a form that's easily readable and actionable. Like we've been testing it out where we could say, hey, summarize the buyer journey for this company. Giant stream of events and all these things. And it does a pretty good job of coming up with and saying, all right, these are the three primary contacts. Here's the 2 or 3 things they actually did that's most important. This company matches other companies like that. And here's the things that those companies did that actually led them to a sale. Cool. That's interesting. And it takes the work of maybe, going in and spending a couple hours analyzing stuff and kind of rolls it up into something that you could just maybe hand to a campaign manager or a salesperson. Say, here's the summary about what's going on. Here's the next things that you should do. And that's where I see them kind of playing.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, the one that you mentioned when you were talking about, position or repositioning as a marketing decision engine, that I think is going to be super useful once it really kind of gains traction is the anomaly detection. To me, that one is super useful because it allows you to catch something early before it becomes a problem, right? Like particularly when you have like campaigns that you're running that aren't living up to other campaigns performance, right? That anomaly detection is a great way to raise a red flag like, hey, something's wrong here. Go look at this campaign before you spend more money on something that's not working. Like to me, that's just so incredibly valuable that that because most marketing organizations, because of the skill spectrum you talked about, most marketing organizations don't always know where to look and when to look there, right? And we're so focused on let's get the campaign out and then we move right on to the next campaign. And we're just campaign to campaign to campaign. And that hold on, let's take a look and see how that campaign we just launched is performing. Is it doing what we expect it to do? That anomaly detection, we kick in and say, hey, this one's either not performing up to snuff, like let's do something about that. Or on the flip side, hey, this thing's blown the doors off of your other campaigns. You might have hit on something here, right? Like that anomaly detection, I think is just huge. Personally.
It's huge, and that's a great use of it. The other thing that machine learning starts to be able to do is detect. As we all know, marketing campaigns may do really well to a point, right? But you can't just keep adding dollars to it, right? It always be linear.
Yeah.
Right. There's a point in time where it starts to go like that. And using machine learning to detect when things are kind of flatlining or coming down, right? Or even better yet, projecting when we're going to hit that natural kind of saturation point for these. That's where I think some of this stuff is going. So it's like, hey, we're running this campaign, it's doing pretty well, but we think it's going to cap here, right? That's going to take you for the next X period of time. This is what we think it's actually going to generate for you. But at that point in time, you need to start looking at the next set of campaigns. You need to start thinking about the next set of tactics, things like that, and being able to some extent, get ahead of those decision points so you can start to plan for them, right? Okay, what do I need to do next quarter? These things are working great, but they're not going to go like that. And if I assume they're going to go like that, and then they do that, the first couple of weeks of the quarter, I blow my budget, or I blow my plan, right? So how do you get ahead of those things?
Well, because to your point, every campaign has two tipping points that it hits. And the first tipping point is where every dollar you spend in it that you add on actually starts to lower the ROI for that additional dollar. So where is that point where that dollar investment stops being worthwhile, right? So because you can, in some campaigns, you can increase your spend and increase your results either linearly or exponentially, depending on where you're at. But eventually you're going to hit that plateau where every additional dollar does not increase the return. So how do we find what that tipping point is? Then you also have, to your other point, every campaign will also not only hit a plateau in their ROI and performance, but they'll start to decline because of the saturation, or they just become stale, or they become less relevant. Where is that point of decline? How do we find that? Those are two things that most organizations don't have a way to find that. And if your decision engine can help people find that, that is invaluable to marketers. Absolutely.
It really is. It really is. And then, and their nirvana is when the platforms can say, what do I do next? Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, everybody we talk to, they want to see like, what is that golden path? What do I just map out the path that if I just keep doing that path, I'm just going to keep generating revenue. And we all know the path doesn't really exist, and it changes constantly, right?
Right.
But there are points in there that say, okay, I am seeing a lot of success here, but you're putting a lot of stuff here. If you shift to here, you're going to get better results. Right?
Yes.
So you can start to point toward, there's not an optimal path, but you could point toward better paths. Right. I think that's where you're going to start to see more and more machine learning start to look at the data to start to figure that out. But again, you're going to need attribution plus more information, because attribution, again, may not be fast enough to help you make decisions at the top of the funnel. right?
Yeah.
Will
Yeah.
help you, but there's no better way of deciding what the value points are for what was working. And then if you can match what did work to things that are like that, you can start to really kind of map out that sort of that better path, should we call it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that it's not a golden path, but it's a better path.
It's a better.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's better than what I'm doing right now? What's going to drive
Yep.
more return on our investment?
Yep. Yep. Well, Eric, in the interest of time, we're coming up on an hour here, and I know that you've got to get going. So, first off, I wanted to just thank you for taking the time to join today and share your journey and your thoughts on attribution. But as I always do, I want to kind of close it out with some of the things that I think I kind of learned here as part of our conversation. So one of my key learnings, which is not necessarily related to attribution, but just something I learned is, when you double revenue, you're going to break the company, and you need to figure out how to pivot certain functional areas to help you double again, because the things that got you to this plateau will not necessarily double that again.
Right.
And I think that does pertain to marketing, not just business, because marketing, what you did from a marketing standpoint to get to X revenue may not be the same things that you need to do to get to Y revenue, which is double that. Another thing that came up a couple of times is that attribution needs to be paired with other data to help really understand the full journey that people are going through. Attribution in and of itself isn't the goal. We've got to get some other data in there to help. However, without attribution, I mean, what the hell are you doing? How can you show what's working and what's not working unless you're just using gut feel? So you've got to get attribution in there as a foundation and then layer on additional data, like particularly like funnel data, to be able to really drive insights. And then the last one that I want to call out here is just that in the future, and CaliberMind is already on this path, is that attribution is really going to be moving more towards a decision engine type of environment instead of just the attribution, because it does require those other data points to be paired with it. And we need to help kind of close that skills spectrum with more things that can help marketers generate the insights that they need to make better decisions.
Yeah, I'll just kind of close on that. I really do believe that, like I say, within 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a tool that everybody uses to help them integrate all this data and make really good decisions. And it's just going to get better and better, leveraging machine learning, leveraging capabilities, pulling the data, especially as the data gets thinner and thinner, which is what we're seeing. It's harder and harder to, I can't just rely on just my email responses. It has to be, right? That tool is going to exist, right? The question is, what are the products that really can kind of migrate into that space and become that tool? And the best candidates I'm seeing are the tools that are coming from analytics and attribution. I've seen some orchestration and CDP tools, but I'm not seeing them really drive toward that. It's going to be that set of capabilities, I think, drive toward that capability or that product that I think everybody's going to have at some point.
Yeah, well, at least the companies that want to use data as a competitive advantage.
Right. Which I think will be everybody who's successful in the next decade. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're super busy, and just really appreciate you joining here and appreciate your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Drew, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure. And, again, thank you.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know there if you'd like access to our private group where we keep these conversations going. On our next episode, we'll be talking with Amir, the CRO of HockeyStack, who gave me a preview of some new product features and indulged me in how AI hype might finally really be valuable for attribution. Hope you'll join us.